Welcome to today's webinar, Working Smarter with AI, Practical Applications for Food Waste Solution Providers. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Angel Vessa, the Director of Innovation Initiatives at ReFed, and we're so glad that you could join us today. This webinar is part of our Learning Lab series. It's designed for solution providers tackling food waste with the goal of giving you practical tools, expert insights, and real-world examples to help you grow your impact. Now, I'm particularly excited about this webinar because AI has been probably one of the most talked about topics in recent years. Many solution providers see both the opportunity and the pressure to incorporate AI into their work, but of course it can be challenging to determine where to start and how to use it strategically to drive your operational efficiency and maximize impact. So that's why we decided to host this conversation. The pace of AI and digital transformation continues to accelerate, and organizations shouldn't have to navigate that journey alone. So our goal today is to provide you with those practical insights and actionable guidance that can help you identify where AI can create value for your organization and really grow your impact. Now, to kick things off, we're going to have a couple of solution providers, Aidan Riley of FarmLeak and Ishan Zhu of Flash Food, share more about the work that they're doing and how they're leveraging AI, just to give us a few examples of what others are doing in this space. So Aidan, we'll have you come on the screen and get us started.
Great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll preface by saying, by no means am I an expert in AI, but I'm excited to be here today because what we do at FarmLink is something that exists so much in the physical world. I mean, it's moving truckloads of food from farm to food bank. Um, but it's been a really, really exciting opportunity for us in the last year trying to leverage some of these tools that have become available. And I've enjoyed it a lot. My team has enjoyed it a lot. And we've seen it'd be very fruitful. So I'm excited to talk about it. A quick overview is, and we can go to the next slide, is what we really try to focus on at FarmLink are really, really large scale moments of surplus, right? So I mean, one example that I put on here is from a couple years back. It's our largest single, let's say, food rescue we've ever done is far as we can tell, it's one of the largest ever done. We worked with so many organizations across the Charitable Food Network. But basically, we ended up moving about 16 million pounds of apples out of West Virginia when pretty much the contracts were canceled in favor of imports from China. And ultimately, what we ended up doing is distributing those apples across 27 different states, hundreds of different communities. We were able to partner with the USDA and get an agreed upon payment for the farmer for that product. And in many cases, it kind of saved the farm, and we were able to get fresh produce out into areas that we don't normally work in. So it was a success story. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because we only learned about this situation pretty much like a month and a half in advance. And so what we had to do in order when we decided this is something worth going after is we had to go to the board, we had to go hundreds of thousands of dollars over budget. We had to put ourselves in a sticky situation where we were taking a lot of risk in order to be able to distribute this food. You can probably go to the next slide. And then ultimately, when we were distributing that food, it was as so many of us on this call do this work. I mean, it was hand to phone, picking it up, asking, "Do you have cold storage? Do you have a lift gate? Does your community need apples? What kind of produce do you need, if not that?" And so all of it was very reactionary and in live time, both on the sourcing side, getting it from the farm, and then on the side of how we were going to distribute it. We were on the phone it took us 6 weeks to distribute all of this, and we were on the phone 24/7 throughout those 6 weeks. So what we focused on when we're like, how can we look at our asset being our pipeline from farm to food bank? That's where we think this technology can really leverage and help elevate how we do what we do. So one of the ways that we're doing that right now is we're looking at all these things that we kind of manually track already, weather patterns, acreage planted compared to the prior year, import volumes from countries where we're importing a lot of our fresh produce from, and a host of other factors. I mean, we know in this industry it comes down to things like if a processor fails, what's going to happen to all of the growers in that region who are dependent on that processor. That used to be something we tracked manually. We track it through newsletters, we track it through conversations in the field with the farmer. What are they seeing? And that will remain important, but it doesn't have to be the only way that we track these risks across commodities. So one way we're using AI on the supply side is by going in and basically building out these API tools that can track, monitor news every 15 minutes for processor distress, labor cost. If fertilizer goes up unexpectedly by, if it doubles, then that's something that will flag and attach to a crop that will indicate to us on a risk dashboard that we've built out, that will say, hey, this is worth monitoring for this crop in this state. And it is something that's going to continually get more advanced and as we layer more and more information and more data into it. But ultimately, what it is doing for us is it's kind of pairing with what I'll say is ground truthing, right? Our conversations out there in the real world. What are you seeing? And then what are we seeing from this data that we're pulling? And ideally, what it's going to do and what it can help us do is increase that lead time from a month where we have to go into panic mode and go over budget and call a bunch of farmers or call a bunch of food banks and make those connections into something that might be 6 to 8 months in advance where we can set those things up ahead of time, which of course ahead of time means you can do things more efficiently. You can set up partnerships for packaging, whatever it might be. So that's really what it's focused on is increasing that lead time so that there's awareness of the situation more than 60, 90 days in advance. And that would mean that would have a huge effect in the food rescue world. Then there's the flip side of it, which is where you're going to actually get that food, right? Like I said, for 6 weeks, we're on the phone. We're calling every food bank across 27 different states, figuring out what they have. For the last 6 years, for all the food that we've moved at FarmLink, when we go and send a truck and it gets to a community, that's great. People get food. There's information in that delivery. That information everywhere from if it's a lift gate to what are the preferences of the community, what can they handle, do they have cold storage? If you can capture that information, you can start to build out a bit of a map that can help you visualize when you have a truckload of produce, again, depending on what it is and where it is, instead of you having to pick up the phone and make those calls every single time, you might have real-time visibility into where is the place that is most effective for you to send this food. And so that's something we have actively been building out since February, and that was really in partnership with McGovern and some other great partners in the space who believed in this project. We call it our food rescue database. What we have just launched with it is a California pilot, California being where we move most of our food at this point. So we can, as this system gets smarter, we can basically put in any available amount of food into our system and have a real-time visibility into what we're calling internally like the capacity mapping of California. Where can this food go? And how is this model going to get smarter as we send more truckloads through the system? Again, I'll just mention that this is something that our team has done very organically over the last 6 years. We build relationships and learn the requests of those communities. So the emphasis has been on taking what we do organically and figuring out how these tools can help us basically codify it into something that can get smarter to support our team as we grow larger because there's more food that needs to be moved. And you have two options. Are we going to hire a call center worth of people to be picking up the phone, or are we going to try to keep the team and small and lean and use the tools that are available? So those are two separate projects that connect with one another for FarmLink's pipeline that have been a really interesting development for us over the last year as we're looking to scale the amount of food we're getting from farm to food bank. And with that, I will pass it over to Ishin and to hear about what they're doing.
Great. Thanks, Aiden. Hey, everyone. My name is Yushin. I lead technology at Flash Food. And hopefully, in the next 3, maybe 5 minutes, I'll walk through how we're using AI both in our product and in how we work internally. So if you go next slide. A little bit about Flash Food, quick context. We're a two-sided marketplace that partners with retailers to help them in their goals of reducing surplus and shrink. We're a convenient digital marketplace for shoppers to find a great deals on fresh and nutritious food. So we like to say when Flash Food works, retailers recover margin, shoppers get affordable access to food, and food stays out of landfill. Some general stats for you to date. Flash Food has, well, just real quick. I didn't put it on the previous slide, sorry, but some stats is we Flash Food has helped grocery shoppers save close to $400 million on saved food, and we've diverted over 175 million pounds of food to date. So if you go next slide, one of our biggest AI use cases is actually in our product right now. It's in our AI-powered markdown pricing. So today, we actually train our pricing models on a variety of signals to essentially predict how the items will be able to sell, what the right discount is, and this actually breaks down on a per SKU per store basis. And it's because it's a markdown pricing, actually, just to clear the air here, we only actually ever adjust our prices down, never up. So as our pricing models kick in, we like to believe that we actually help shoppers save even more on their groceries. And then every transaction adds signal, so it actually keeps getting smarter. And over time, this allows us to kind of create what, in the machine learning world, it's called reinforcement learning. So every transaction or lack thereof of a transaction makes our models better, and we're able to forecast better and able to perform better. Now, if you go to the next slide, two other quick examples. As we're getting really good at predicting the performance of items, we can also do things like we can use that prediction performance to recommend to our partners what is actually the right things to post, when to post it, how much to post, what pricing to put on it, obviously. And then as a result, we can also build better sort of catalog data ingestion, which will help essentially reduce the manual effort of keeping, accurate product data on the platform. And this essentially creates a better data moat in order to be able to, again, have better prediction on pricing, better posting models, et cetera. And that will also feed into the reinforcement model as well. And then last slide. And AI is not just in our product, it's also in how we work. So we've also built a number of internal agents for the company to be able to do better analyses and reporting, like you just saw in the previous couple slides. And our primary sort of learning against this is that, organizations that win with AI, it's not about just having the smartest models per se. It's really just about how do you close the gap between insight and action. And that's what we're doing inside the company. And fun fact for everyone here, all of our agents inside the company are named after food and grocery items. Our data reporting bot is named after an asparagus. So it keeps in line with our mission and values. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Ishan. I love that you named your agents after different food products. That's hilarious. I love that. So for our audience, I hope that gives you a bit of a teaser of how AI can really support your work. And now, before we dive into a discussion with the panelists, I want to first introduce Jackie Watts from the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. Jackie leads the foundation's efforts to develop resources and learning experiences that can help organizations build their AI capabilities and advance along their AI journey. So she's going to provide us with some shared language and frameworks to really help guide our conversation. And with that, I'd love to welcome Jackie onto the screen.
Great. Thanks so much, Angel. Thanks for having me, and excited to continue this conversation. So I'm going to talk a bit today about just kind of the basics and making sure that we're all on the same page around some terminology. My name is Jackie Watts. As Angel mentioned, I'm the Learning and Insights Lead at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. And just a little bit more about who we are as a foundation. The Patrick J. McGovern Foundation is a philanthropic institution dedicated to advancing AI and data science solutions to create a thriving, equitable, and sustainable future for all. So if you go to the next slide, just a little bit about how we do this through, funding. Of course, we have a lot of grant partners who are working at the intersection of AI and social impact. We also have an in-house technical team, a products and services team that works on building AI solutions and providing technical assistance to organizations. And finally, we have our learning and insights work, which is really focused on building learning opportunities around how organizations can use AI beyond just our grant partner network, really for the wider sector. So just looking at some learning objectives for the talk that I'll be giving today, deeper understanding of what AI is and making sure we're all on the same page with some of that terminology, a clearer picture of how you might be able to responsibly apply AI in your work. And thanks to Aiden and Yishin, we have some great examples to look to now for really practical applications. And finally, a better understanding of what that typical journey might look like if your organization is at that earlier stage of thinking about how AI might be applied. What does it look like really to move into adoption or developing AI-based solutions? So that's what we'll talk about today. Let's start with that basic terminology and thinking about what artificial intelligence is. Artificial intelligence is really an umbrella term for a lot of different techniques that you've probably heard some of these terms being thrown around and maybe aren't quite sure how they fit together. And we'll talk about each of them briefly today. This is not going to be a comprehensive, it's not intended to be exhaustive of all AI techniques. It's just kind of a glance, but it tends to cover a lot of the basic use cases that might be applicable within your organization. So let's take a look first at the highest level, artificial intelligence. And that's really the ability of machines to perform tasks that typically require human-like intelligence. So things like problem solving and reasoning. If we go on to the next slide, or actually you can go to the next one after that. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. And this is algorithms and models that enable machines to learn from really, really, really large amounts of data and make predictions without being explicitly programmed kind of how to make those decisions. And within machine learning, we have deep learning, which is a type of machine learning that learns complex patterns and representations in your large data sets through a neural network architecture. So really modeling after the brain. Natural language processing is the next one I'll talk about, which is teaching computers to understand and interpret human language. And at the intersection between natural language processing and deep learning there is generative AI, which a lot of you might have already been playing around a little bit. Generative AI is when we use deep learning architecture and natural language processing to generate text, images, video, other media. So this is, our ChatGPT and other large language models now that have become super popular in the past few years. But some of these other techniques like machine learning and others have been around for much longer. So before I go into the next section, I do want to just mention, I know I've been using this term model quite a bit, and you might be wondering kind of what is a model? How is it different from those techniques? A model is really just a specific implementation of one of these techniques. And a model really requires being trained on some data before it is useful, trained on really large amounts of data. And only then is it effective in coming up with a result when it is fed some new data. So hopefully that clears up some of the common terminology. Let's look next at how AI can be applied. We have a few different frameworks I'm going to talk about here that just help offer a little bit of and hopefully help get the wheels turning about potential use cases. The first distinction here is predictive versus generative AI, and we've talked a little bit about this in those different techniques earlier, but really predictive AI is intended to make predictions based on certain factors in your data, called features of your data. And this helps users or your system kind of choose between different options. So if you've used recommendation systems like Amazon's recommendation system, or fraud detection is another common example of predictive AI. We've also seen many examples through FarmLink and Flash Foods work, prediction on how items will sell at a particular discount or prediction of where food can be routed. Those are great examples of predictive AI. Generative AI, on the other hand, is producing or generating output that mimics human generated content. So again, text, images, or video. And that could be through a standalone product, like some of you may have experimented already with ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Anthropic's Claude, or it could be integrated into features of a product. So if you've, for instance, used Canva to produce marketing materials that has kind of a generative AI feature built within that, that is often using one of those foundational models under the hood, but it gives a really nice integration into some of the other software that we might use. So if we go to the next slide, that predictive versus generative AI is a very, very kind of high level way of distinction between AI use cases. And here's a little bit more of a granular breakdown. We like this categorization from the National Institute of Standards and Technology that outlines use cases according to the human behaviors that your system might be trying to recreate. So things like content creation or content synthesis are very frequent, goals of a generative AI system. And then some of them on here maybe are a little bit more in that predictive AI domain, things like prediction or detection or monitoring. And some of those other use cases might kind of fit somewhere in the middle. But this is a way we like to think about, what are all those powerful ways that AI could be applied towards the problems that we're tackling on the day-to-day. If we go to the next slide, the next distinction I want to talk about in terms of how AI could be applied is kind of on the spectrum between some maybe internal productivity use cases to programmatic impact or transformational use cases. Programmatic impact use cases here are really thinking about, how could I leverage AI to really drive big wins for the mission that my organization is trying to achieve. And that could be anything from, say, predicting which beneficiaries need more support so that you can design your services accordingly, or recommending personalized resources at scale. Things like that are examples of programmatic impact. Versus if we look at operational use cases, those might be things like using, if we go to the next slide, using generative AI to create a first draft of a grant report or a memo. Or as Yishin mentioned, internal use cases like doing some data analysis on your internal data and reporting. So those are great examples of what might benefit your organization from an operational perspective. There are many off-the-shelf solutions, and so we always encourage organizations to be looking at, what's already built and really can help achieve our goals before thinking about what might need to be built a little bit more custom. But off-the-shelf solutions could be any of those kind of large language models like that are built into, say, our Microsoft Copilot built into the Microsoft suite or Gemini for the Google suite. Some tools are a little bit more fit for purpose. If you're looking further down on that list, something like Grantable is built specifically for working with grant reporting or grant writing. And then custom AI tools are some of those examples we just heard earlier in this webinar that are trying to really target organization-specific goals and building solutions that can really tackle some of those mission-critical things. So the AI journey is the next thing I'll talk about briefly. And this is really talking to what's it going to look like for your organization. If you're starting at that very beginning, what's it going to look like for AI adoption? We think of the AI journey as an ongoing process. It's from moving from your current state of using AI or data to a desired next state based on your needs and goals. And it goes through, or we think of it as going through 4 different stages for your organization. So starting at curiosity, maybe you haven't taken any initial steps towards integrating AI into your organization's work, but you're thinking about, what are some of those opportunity areas? What are some of the use cases? And what are some of the things that we can do as an organization to help prepare us and think about organizational readiness and things like that? Exploration, the second phase there, is when you maybe have a more targeted goal of what you're looking to build and you're exploring kind of how to make it a reality. So things like really deeply understanding the problem that you're looking to address through your solution, preparing your data, and planning a project before going into that adoption phase, which is where you might start to pilot initial prototype and then pilot initial AI solutions and continue to evaluate how they're working for your organization and refining those solutions. And finally, impact is thinking about, how do you start scaling or optimizing a solution. So if we go to the next slide, there's some foundational components that we think of as really critical kind of across the entire journey. There at the top, social responsibility. I'll talk about that in just another couple of slides. But there's some other things that we feel are important to be baked in throughout the process, throughout your AI journey, including AI strategy. How do you engage your stakeholders? How do you think about data management and data governance and the technologies that you're leveraging to make it happen? So some of those foundational components are critical to be thought of throughout the journey. They're not a one and done. This next slide on how AI is developed, I left it in here, although I'm not going to talk about it in depth. It's a pretty there's a lot going on in this slide, but the thing I really wanted to emphasize, and this is not just if you're developing a custom AI solution, I actually should retitle this to say, AI development or just adopting an off-the-shelf solution. One of the most critical things we always point to is this very first step of problem definition. Defining the problem is really the most critical part of the process, because if you skip that step of defining the problem and go right into, what is this shiny new technology? How can I apply it? What are these really amazing technical things that we could do with AI, it might be missing the mark on what the actual needs of your community are. And only by addressing those needs will that investment in building a technology solution be worth it, right? You might otherwise spend a whole lot of time and a whole lot of resources building something that actually is missing the mark on meeting the needs of your community. So always starting with the problem and not a tech-first approach. If we go on to the next slide, I'll talk very briefly about social responsibility, one of those foundational components that I mentioned earlier. And you might hear about this talked about as AI and ethics or responsible AI. And really, this is what we think of as guiding principles to help, again, be baked in throughout the way you think about AI integration and adoption. It's not something that should be tacked on after the fact, but rather keeping these principles kind of as your, frontmost of importance when you're thinking about your AI adoption. So at Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, we've aligned around these 6 principles: fairness, transparency, human-centeredness, data privacy and security, inclusion, and sustainability. That list might look slightly different for your organization depending on the communities you're working with, the domain in which you're working. It's something that we encourage organizations to do a bit of reflection on what are those critical AI, responsible AI guidelines that should be helping to shape our work. And it might have a lot of overlap, but you might have some other ones that you highlight. So there's a lot of resources on PJMF's Learning Hub, which I'll include the link here in just another slide. But on the next slide, there's some resources specific to social responsibility that I've pulled out into the slide deck here for you. So hopefully, I think Angel's going to be sharing these slides afterwards. And we encourage folks to peruse these resources. In addition, if you go into the next section, also pulled out some AI 101 resources for you to kind of further your learning of some of the AI basics. On the next slide is the link for the Learning Hub, and this is what PJMF has put together that's curated resources from across all different phases of the AI journey. I highlighted the curiosity page here, but there are parts of the hub that speak to all different phases and different topics that might be relevant towards AI adoption, and different curated resources in addition to trainings and case studies and things that we've put together. So I'm going to maybe leave these last couple of slides. There's some tips for folks to peruse after the fact. I'm not going to go through each of them one by one because I want to make sure we get to go into our moderated discussion next. But just some tips for you to peruse in this slide deck afterwards. So I'll pass it back over to you, Angel.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jackie. Really incredible, helpful context and a great conversation starter for us. So with that, would like to transition to that discussion and bring back Aiden and Yishin back onto the screen with me. And just to kick things off, I would love to kind of hear from you all if you have, a specific experience from your AI journey that was unexpected. And what did you learn from that? And how has it influenced your approach today? And Jackie, if you have a case study you want to share, would love to hear it. But with that, maybe Aiden, I'll have you kick things off for us on that one.
Yeah. I'm laughing because the whole thing has been unexpected. But I went recently back and I looked at my college uh uh thesis that I did in 2020, and that was about the pursuit of artificial general intelligence, and which we're arguably on the cusp of now. But the what was interesting about that was at the time, everything I was reading, all the research I did for it, it was looking at, it got the timing right in terms of probably when is this technology going to start getting implemented in all of our day-to-days and work, different industries. What it didn't get right was what industries it was going to target most poignantly. So like the biggest concern when I was doing this research back in 2020, and maybe this will sound familiar to you all, was if this is going to take all the jobs of truck drivers and factory workers and that was basically stated as a fact, was, specifically, oh, we're going to get self-driving trucks and robots on the road, and those are going to disrupt all these jobs that require labor. um Now we know that that actually is a lot harder than we thought it would be, and that we saw unicorn companies get launched for self-driving trucks that then failed. And then if you look at go to like 2022, 2023, like the overarching narrative was these language models are so good at, generating copy, and that the concern was this is going to take over the whole storytelling industry, and Hollywood itself is going to turn on its head because there's not going to need to be screenwriters anymore. And now we know a couple years later after that, that's kind of also harder than you think it really than we thought it was going to be initially. And you know, now we're at today. I would say the version of that today is what is possible with agents, and how it can take over the field of computer science and also law and all these other industries that were not even mentioned back in my 2020 thesis project. And so I guess my main point is it's helpful to learn, or it's helpful to remind myself that no matter what you're reading and what's coming out and what the expert online is saying, like, this ultimately is speculation, and we aren't great at predicting the future. And so it is a risk, therefore, to um, take that speculation and put it into something that is maybe a core strategy, or a core strategy that's different from who you are as an individual or as a company. If I had listened to my own thesis back in the day, I would have built FarmLink around a world where self-driving trucks were ubiquitous in 2026, and that would have probably been a bad idea. Um, so yeah, that's helpful, a helpful reminder. We're kind of, it's still building the plane as we're flying it, and we don't know what's going to be available in the next 2 years.
Love that. Yeah, still so much unknown and appreciate that caution. Yishin, what about you?
Yeah, I think building off of what Aiden said, I think our key learning really is that, AI is really only as useful as your data is good.
Hmm.
And for us, again, building off what Aiden said, which I agree with, reality is messy. Real world grocery data is messy. Being able to try to capture, what's on the shelf, what's currently happening, customer returned or didn't pick this up, or delay in shipments, like, how do you capture that in real time? It's really easy to make a prediction when you have a sort of static world and everything's perfect. You just say, great, like this is going to happen. But again, reality is messy. And so what we learned really from that was to really focus less on like the AI and the features. Yes, there's a lot of noise like generative AI, like Fable's out, like there's all these like new improvements every day, every week. What really helped us was to just really focus on making sure that our data is good, that we have good systems to capture and clean and ensure high quality on our data, working with our partners to collect that and then building up from there, right? So not starting from whatever you saw a post like, I don't know, Anthropic re-releases Mythos or something like that, and you go and you jump and you try to build a bunch of agentic workflows. We try to avoid all that and say, okay, what is the data that we have? What's the thing that we're trying to solve for with our partners, for our shoppers, and go from there. And you'll find over time you can get some really cool workflows, but it's important to kind of start small, recognize that data in reality is hard and messy, and try your best to try to wrangle that as much as possible.
Yeah, great reminders. Reality is absolutely messy. And I hear you also kind of going to what Jackie was saying about, really hearing about, the voice of the customer, that problem first approach, and really appreciate that. Jackie, anything you would add?
No, you nailed it, Angel. It really staying true to the problem, I think, is so key. As I love that you brought that up, Yishin, that data, real world data is really messy, and waiting for your data to get your data perfect, or waiting to get that you have a technology that you've gotten perfect. It's like that's going to evolve and continue to change so quickly, that really staying true to the problem is probably the best approach to guide you in the right direction ultimately.
Yeah. And so what's coming up for me is, when I look at a lot of the different solutions out there, I think a common feature that we see is that they're leveraging AI to generate valuable recommendations, and probably based on this, high quality data. But I think we can recognize recommendations alone won't reduce food waste, right? We need the people and the organizations to really take action on those. And so whether it is, driving that operational change and efficiency in your organization, or getting your customers to do something differently, I'm curious to hear from you all. How do you close that gap between that insight and recommendation and then actual implementation on the ground? Ishan, maybe I'll start with you and kind of hear how you work with your retailers and customers.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's sort of saying, another way to phrase that question is to ask, like, how do you get real people to trust AI to some extent, right? Like it's one thing to kind of be impressed with a uh, I don't know, like a gimmick or something like AI is really good at writing documents or something like that. It's another to say like, oh yeah, our AI recommended that you shift your inventory this way or you redo this, and now you're talking like business decisions or livelihood, like how many people you need to hire to like make sure that supply can match demand and things like that. And maybe I'll take an unconventional approach. I think for us, ours is like, how do we leverage the tech to essentially better build trust with humans, with our partners, with our shoppers? And actually, I'll throw in an example. I think this has happened before when the invention of the automated elevator came about in like the 1920s. I don't know if anyone remembers that or recognizes it, but when automated elevators came out, like they had to put a human elevator operator in there. If you see like old school movies, like there's a person that like presses the lever and the elevator goes up. That person was actually totally unnecessary. You didn't need that person there. But people at the time were not accustomed in getting into a self-operating machine. They did not trust that the machine would safely take them up or down. And so they required a human to be there to almost like help with that transition. And that transition took decades. And there's been countless other examples like that. But I think what we're seeing with AI is something similar. When we get into or a self-driving car or something like that, there's a degree of just like, how do I trust that this thing knows and can make the right decision, that understands, whether it's for me, whether it's for my business, whether it's for my customers, that it knows it's making the best decision and can also execute on it. And so what we've done really is, again, going with my last answer, starting sort of small, right? Our approach is not to try to automatically solve all the problems. It's to say, great, what's a specific thing that you struggle with that is hard or that's messy? Maybe that's collecting a bunch of different data reports from different systems because data lives in, 7, 8, 9 different systems. How do we make that, instead of cumbersome, how do we make that maybe as seamless as possible? So you just get one central view of it. You can go and maybe check that data yourself. You don't need to take it at its word. And over
Mhm.
time, what ends up happening is you start to realize, oh, okay, it knows because I've been using this for the last year. It's been helping me make the right decisions. Maybe I can give it a little bit more agency, a little bit more agency, a little bit more automation. And that's essentially what we're doing. With our partners, we're trying to do this by building trust in our pricing systems, in our data and analytics with our shoppers by finding them the best deals and making sure that they have good variety of fresh produce and food. And our hope is that over time we can start to do that more automatically, but understanding that that building of trust takes a little bit of time.
Definitely. Yeah, I appreciate the elevator example and just that call out about trust and how it will take time to really establish that. And I'm curious what your experience has been with this.
Yeah, for us, it's been first and foremost, I think it's probably important to say on the trust front. Um, for us, it's been building trust with the team first. This kind of like feverish pursuit of technology and or efficiency, maybe is a better way to put it, can feel claustrophobic for team members sometimes, especially in a world that we work in, which is primarily relationships. And I would say that's probably true for most or many companies. Um, and my point with that is, so I'll take an example of the thing that we're building right now, which is our food rescue database. One element in there, once we can identify who has like what the infrastructure is, who's capable of taking what, there still is the question that we need to organically figure out, which is this culturally relevant? Is this a community that has not received this type of fresh produce or any fresh produce in 6 months versus this other community who has comparable infrastructure? So that's a problem that you can't really at this early stage code in, how you can compare to needs, right? That's something that we rely on our team members and their knowledge, their history with those relationships and those communities to help decide. But we couldn't do that retroactively. We couldn't go code something and then tell the teammates to go figure that out and help us. So we had to have the upfront conversation first, and understand that our kind of state out there that our goal here is not efficiency at the cost of everything else. Our goal here is to continue to do what we do well and build in tools that can help us do it better. And so what can we preserve here and what can we get in and tinker with? And if we can have that conversation upfront with the team, then you build trust in. Then you can try to experiment without starting to touch on sensitive, particular, and tricky areas. And that has not been an easy thing for us to do because we're talking about changing a process that has been done for many of our teammates for several decades in a row. So yeah, it still comes back to this human thing of taking the trickier problems and addressing upfront with the team so that so that it gives you trust within a sort of, little sandbox for you to experiment and figure out the areas that you can actually prioritize efficiency in, as an example.
Yeah, what both of you are saying, what comes to my mind is really everything starts and ends with people. Even when we bring in, AI, it still is about the people and those relationships and maintaining that trust, even when you are doing something so new that can be transformative for your work. So thank you for all of that. Jackie, anything you wanted to add to that?
I just say, like, to the extent that it's possible to just bring your stakeholders throughout the process, bring their voice throughout the process of thinking about that AI opportunity, starting to design it, maybe even the data collection. We've had a lot of partners who bring in community members to help with if you're thinking about what data sets to get in place for powering your solution. Bringing community members into that process can be really powerful as a way to build trust, to help make sure you're preserving the cultural nuance. As Aiden mentioned, really, there's always some nuance with different locations that you might be working with or within the communities that you're working. In addition to helping make sure you're navigating any data sensitivity or data sovereignty challenges, all of that is really something that embedding the voices of the communities that you're working with can help to mitigate any potential risks there.
Definitely. I'm curious on that note, as we think about if someone's getting started right now on their AI journey, kind of what do you think they need to be doing, right now that will really help them be successful looking ahead, let's say 5 years from now? Are there particular mindsets or capabilities, practices? We've talked a lot about data. What should they be doing right now that will help them be very successful in the future as they start to integrate AI into their work?
I can jump in first
Yeah.
and just say, getting started. I mean, I think that is a really hard barrier
Mm.
sometimes to feel like it's overwhelming to know how to get started. And so just starting super tiny, experimenting with some off-the-shelf tools, seeing how they work, seeing where their limitations are, not feeling like you need to be like fully like everything's dialed before getting started on working with different tools or thinking about different solutions. It's going to be an iterative process and just embracing that learning, that growth mindset, that learning in the process.
Yeah, thanks. Aiden, I saw you on mute for a second there. Did you want to build on that?
Uh, yeah, I think two things. The first is as was already said here, starting with the problem. I do think people always need, an overarching reason to move in to a new venture, whether it's bringing in new technology, something like AI, whatever it might be. But you got like start with what's core to what you already do, and I think it's worth asking that question. Is implementing this going to help what we are trying to do, our current existing problems? If you have to invent a new problem in order to justify the movement into utilizing AI as an example, then that is probably not a good thing. You want it to solve the same problems you're already trying to get out, or help you solve the larger problems that you're moving towards, your mission statement. Um, and yeah, I just don't believe that something like this, it's like sort of the shiny object syndrome. Like a lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of resources moving towards it. That is not necessarily a reason alone to go and try to implement. In that case, you end up with, at best something that is useful but not core to what you do, and at worst, it's a distraction where you're putting in money. It's actually taking away from what you do. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm a massive believer on what this can do, on what this new technology can do for organizations in the space. But you have to start with that core question: what is the problem? Is this different than the problem we already had? And then the second thing is I also like the point on here. I think Jack, your presentation said don't lead in a vacuum. I have found no I have felt very useless to my team when I'm like, go implement these tools, guys. You got to use these tools like Claude Code, Replit, whatever. Everyone just gets frustrated and they're like, yeah, you and every article I see on Instagram, whatever, telling me to use these tools. The only times where it's become exciting and a creative process and super engaging is when either I or someone else on the team has taken ownership to say, this is a problem that I see that we already have, and I've figured out how to implement it, at least like an early stage, and I want to bring you in and like, I mean, let's sit together and look and work through this. Or I've built this thing for you for something that I saw took you 10 hours last week that I don't think should take you 10 hours. Then you're engaging people and recognizing that this is actually very personal for a lot of people for their own reasons. And if you can bring it to what's relevant to them, you see a lot more openness, and you just get moving a lot quicker, and you stop becoming that manager who's just saying, use these tools. You do it with them, alongside them.
I like about what I was taking away from that, Ian, is really there has to be like a real why to that, and maybe even going in deeper and deeper to make sure there is truly a strategic reason to be using something. And I do like that you're also thinking through about, you mentioned this before, but not just the problem for that you're trying to solve with the work that you do, but also problem for your teammates, right? And how we can make their jobs better and more fulfilling. And I really appreciate that. Yishin, what about you?
I really like what Aiden and Jackie both said, actually. If
Yeah.
I were to try to synthesize that into I think the question was what can you do? Uh, it's funny, we're talking about tech and AI, but I actually think the first step in this is to turn off your computer, get a notebook, stand in front of a whiteboard, really just think about what I think what Aiden was saying is like, what's the problem? Why do you want to solve the problem you want to solve? Like,
Hmm.
what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And by the way, that's not money. Money is a side effect. What is the actual problem? Why do you care? Um, start with the why,
Yeah.
and then I think you go with what Jackie said. Then you start using the tools. Shut off LinkedIn. Don't read anything on LinkedIn. Everyone says that on LinkedIn, if you don't there, everyone thinks that they've automated their entire lives and AI has like made them transcended life or something. Just shut that off. Again, start with your why. Start building. Solve simple problems. Investigate, research, and just start building. And I think over time, as you continue to do that, you'll build the right habits, and you'll be able to have a good way to also filter out the noise as well, right? When a new tool
Hmm.
comes out, a new capability comes out, you'll be able to evaluate that yourself. You'll be able to say, well, okay, great. How does that fit with what I've been doing? Right. And don't, I think, and this was also Aiden's point, don't start with the tool and say, oh, this is really cool. It's shiny and new. Let me go and play with it or shove it down everyone's throats. You say, well, no, like, let's take a look at what we've built, what we're trying to achieve. How does this fit in? And if it does, great, let's try it out. If it doesn't, great, now you know, right? Like maybe it's not worthwhile to adopt this thing because it doesn't fit in with what you're trying to achieve. And then you don't go on this like 2 month side quest, right? And you don't get distracted. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I appreciate that. And, I think, and I want to bring in this question that came in through the chat, which is obviously we're talking a lot about, okay, what's our why? What's the problem we're trying to solve? But of course, we also want to be aware of any unintended negative consequences, right? And, Nina from NRDC was asking, how do you recommend people balance the environmental harms of AI, right? Data centers power and water use and all of that with all of these great opportunities as well. And so what would you recommend people think about or balance that trade-off with also the opportunity?
I can jump in. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's a great question. I think it actually builds off of I think what I said before, right? Is if you start with the why and you there is a mission that you're trying to solve that you think is a good social mission. It's a problem worth solving. It's a problem you or others that you know are experiencing, and you build from there. What you'll find is actually a lot of the times the things that you'll need to build are not the cutting edge models that costs gigawatts of energy and require 5x the space of data centers to go and do. A lot of times this like cutting edge stuff is maybe useful for, well, who knows, like some of these bigger entities that are doing month long things. But if you're trying to solve real problems for people, you're trying to make data more readily accessible to suppliers, who are then trying to make that data so that they don't spend too much extra time driving on the road, which is also bad for the environment. So you could use AI as is intended, use it as a tool to solve real problems. And I think if you approach it that way, I think the ROI ends up netting out positive because you're trying to leverage a tool that exists, right? There's another thing to say like, oh yeah, AI data center is bad. I'm just never going to touch it. I think that's also maybe a little bit too extreme of a stance. And so it's saying, hey, this is a tool that is really powerful. There is a cost to it. How do I make sure that I'm using this responsibly? That I'm trying to use it in a way that is solving real problems for people. And I think that's the best you can do.
Yeah, I'll add on that. I would argue that um, if you are on this call and you're on Refed's mailing list, the chances are it's pretty high likelihood that that what you're using the tool to work on is it's a sustainability focused organization in one way or the other. Um, at a time like this, I mean, I kind of laugh and I get reminded a little bit of the fact that, the term personal carbon footprint and that idea was invented by BP, the oil company. It's like, and that sometimes we're guilty because I've left my kitchen lights on overnight and I'm like, ah, man, I'm destroying the planet. Let's have a larger picture here. Like there's available technology that's out there that can help make missions more efficient, help you speed up your missions and do more with less. I'm really excited for the opportunity to hit an industry like food rescue or any industry that is helping getting food to people and less food wasted, less food ending up in a landfill. Um, I think there is an overarching sense of responsibility we should share for our planet, and that should permeate through how you use your work and how you as an organization set up your own guidelines for it. But if there's anybody I want in this world using these tools and what's available to them, it's many of the people on this call right now. So um, I want to see missions in this space grow because of available technology, not the opposite. And I don't think there should be so much of a place of guilt within that. Not here. I'm excited for what we can do together as a community with what's becoming available to us.
Here, here. Well said. Um, well, maybe one last question because we only have a few minutes left here, and this is for all of you. If you could leave our attendees with one action they should be taking in the next 30 days to really move their organization forward using this great tool, AI, what would it be? Maybe Jackie, I'll have you kick us off.
Yeah, I'd say one action that we find is a really nice precursor to helping your teams think about AI is vocalizing to your organization and vocalizing to your network kind of what are some of the things that you want to condone as responsible AI use cases. So putting out kind of an AI use case policy is a common first step of thinking about internal adoption at least. And putting together and really articulating to your community where you think there is really powerful ways that they can use AI and where are some of those guardrails where you don't want them to be using AI for certain things. Or if they are using it, what data should they use or not use within those systems? So that's really maybe a first step to empower your team members to start experimenting more.
Aiden, I'll go over to you next.
Yeah, I think something I think worth pointing out is that there's a big gap still between using AI as you think about it with an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT, and then using it when it comes to those programs and their like agentic capabilities, what you can do with agents, right? So you can get your teammates to get on and start using Claude to help you write copy. That's great and all, but I think there's a really high exciting ceiling for when you can start implementing agents into your work. So I mean, I had a board member recently just say, just go build an agent, just do that. And I always felt that that was something that was very daunting. And so, but I went on and all I had to do was this was the most basic task ever. Just go scrape every morning any news headers that have to do with food waste or hunger in the United States, and just send me an email every morning that summarizes that. And that was one prompt and maybe two prompts that I had to put in. And but once I did that, it broke down the mental barrier for me, and I was able to start to imagine and get a little more creative about how we can implement this in other parts of our work. So yeah, that's what I would say is go out, you as an individual, use Replit or Claude Code or whatever it might be. It's not as complicated as it sounds when you're reading about it. If you know how to prompt something in ChatGPT, you'll know how to use this. And go build an agent for something really basic that is currently costing you time. And that's going to open up the possibility for you for what else you can use.
Thank you. Yishin, bring us home.
Yeah, agree with Jackie and Aiden. Do that first. But I guess my extra throw in here would be, I mean, don't be afraid to ask for help. There are companies out there that help. Folks like Jackie who seem really good at explaining, AI to non-technical people. Reach out to your network. Just start a dialogue. You'll soon find that you'll be surrounded by like-minded people, and go on this journey together.
Amazing. Well, a huge thank you to you guys for all of these great insights and pieces of advice. We really appreciate it. We asked many questions of you all, but I want to ask our audience a couple of questions. So we're going to launch a poll here in a second, and we'd love your feedback on today's webinar. You know, how useful is this content for you? Would you recommend it to others? And if you could just take a moment to complete that, we would really appreciate it. And of course, if you do have any feedback for us, please feel free to share that with us directly. You can see my email on the screen, and you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. We really want to make sure we're improving our events and giving you the insights that you need. So I'll let those polls trickle in, but if you're still with us, thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again.